Hi, my name is Naomi Soto, and today I will be talking to you about the different types of abuses and the long-term effects of child abuse. So, the United States has one of the worst records compared to other nations. In 2014, agencies had an estimated 702,000 victims of child maltreatment. There are different types of abuse, such as verbal, mental, physical, and sexual. There's a misconception that abuse is only considered abuse if it is physical and if it leaves marks and bruises, but emotional and verbal abuse can be very detrimental to a child and can cause pain, and it is considered abuse. So let's first learn about the different types of abuse in order to learn about the long-term effects of child abuse. So, verbal abuse is name calling, threats, body shaming, attack on your self esteem, and insecurities. So, basically, verbal abuse is when someone calls you bad names in which they bring you down. They threaten to hurt you and even threaten to take their life or yours if you don't do something. They will body shame you by saying mean things about your body, personality, physical features, intelligence. They will say things like you're so stupid, ugly, fat. They want to bring you down. They don't want you to have any type of confidence because then you'll have the confidence to go up against them, and they don't want that. They want you to be in their hands. So, lastly, they will pick at your insecurities and highlight them. They will try to do everything in their power to make you believe them, and they will bring your self esteem down. So, emotional abuse, there's no affection or love. They belittle you and they play with your feelings or emotions. As a child, your whole world is your parents or your caregiver, and emotionally, you love them unconditionally, and you're always watching them, you're always gazing at them, you watch their every move. And so, emotional abuse would be when the caregiver does not show affection at all towards the child. They do not say affectionate words, but instead they say things like, "You ruined my life," or "I hate you." If they do say "I love you," they take it back a couple of hours later. With emotional abuse, they usually do not have an emotional connection with the child. They don't play with the child, they really just don't interact with the child. So the child is basically relying on him or herself to give that affection and love towards each other and themselves. Physical abuse, intentionally causing physical harm to somebody. Physical abuse is not discipline, it is very different. This is taking it to another extreme. It's intentionally hurting someone because you want them to suffer. The abuser may be hurt or mad and they take it out by hitting someone. Physical abuse is punching, hitting, choking, biting, scratching, using other weapons and objects such as belts, spatulas, basically anything they can get their hands on. Signs of physical abuse can be bruises, marks, scars, cuts, and signs of past healing marks. This could be broken bones, fractures, old bruises, anything that just looks like you can't get by falling. Just any marks that do not look natural that you would get from falling or accidentally hitting yourself. So, sexual abuse is penetration, digital interaction, kissing inappropriately, exposing oneself. Uh, Sexual abuse is it's not only penetration, this includes masturbation, in which the offender masturbates in front of the child or makes the child do something to their own body so the offender can watch. Oral sexual abuse, when the offender makes the child touch them or they touch the child in their genitals or even um, just kissing in a very inappropriate way. It includes taking pictures of the child without clothes or in their underwear. Um, Also, it is talking to the child in an inappropriate way in which they say sexual things. It can also include child pornography, where they distribute pictures of a child or send it to friends. Yeah. The effects of child abuse. There's critical factors such as type of abuse, duration of the abuse, services they received. Um, there are many critical factors, and each factor affects the child differently. This would be the type of abuse they received, or if they're being abused in multiple ways, or even by multiple people, the duration they were abused, as well as if they disclosed to somebody and received services to help them through this. Another factor would be who the abuser was. If it was a parent or a close family member, it could impact the child differently because trust would be broken and it could affect them in the future with future relationships, friendships, intimacy. It's just hard when the person you love is supposed to care for you and look after you and they're abusing you. Um, Another thing to keep in mind is that every child is going to handle the abuse differently. Therefore, you cannot really categorize each child um, in the way that you're going to help them. You have to take each case differently, and not a single way is going to work for each child. So um, you have to create a plan that works for the child that is specifically for them. So polyvictimization, the child abuse is linked to polyvictimization, bullying, and assault. So, polyvictimization is linked to child abuse. Adults who experience child abuse as a child have a higher chance of being victimized as an adult. This includes bullying, assault, verbal and emotional abuse, etc. They can be victimized by peers, friendships, or even intimate relationships. This may happen because they may believe it is normal, or they cannot tell anyone because of the trauma that happened to them when they were a child. They almost think that it's normal to be treated that way. A research concluded that 72% of physical or sexual abuse also experienced abuse as an adult, compared to 42% of women who did not experience any type of abuse as a child. There's a correlation of abuse, that's the correlation of abuse in children and becoming abuse in adults. And children who are abused may have low self esteem and they may have a harder time of controlling their anger because they couldn't resolve conflict as a child, and therefore they have trouble resolving conflict as an adult. So, the physical health problems include diabetes, headaches, gastrointestinal problems, arthritis, hepatitis, stroke, heart disease, high blood pressure. These are just some of the physical health problems listed that could have resulted from child abuse. In a study done, the US meta analysis concluded a total of 78 effects from 24 studies that found health problem as an effect from child maltreatment and abuse. There was some increased health risks, such as neurological, respiratory, such as asthma, cardiovascular, and gastrointestinal problems. I personally know someone who was abused as a child, and now as an adult, she suffers from gastrointestinal problems. She has Crohn's disease and IBS, and her stomach will flare up and get bloated and hurt when she is under pressure. Or if she gets mad and gets into an argument, 9 times out of 10, she will have to lay down because her stomach bloats quite a bit. It's just all that stress. And um, so, although researchers do not have a direct answer to why physical health problems are linked to abuse, they do know that it is a result from it, and so they concluded that it's because of the high stress and the effect it has on the immune system. So, some more physical health problems would be they are more likely to engage in high risk behaviors such as smoking, alcohol, and sexual behaviors. Some other physical health problems may be risky and they engage in them, such as smoking, drinking excessive and unhealthy amounts of alcohol, having sex without protection, such as condoms, and this would also include using illegal drugs. Mental health problems: PTSD, post traumatic stress disorder, personality disorders, depression, anxiety disorders, suicidal behavior. PTSD, or post traumatic stress disorder, is a mental health problem some people develop after a traumatic experience. Some of the symptoms are getting flashbacks and being in the state of mind or a setting and not being able to come back to the present. So if something triggers them, they go back to that flashback and they can't really come back. It's hard for them to snap out of it. And so some people have feelings of being on edge and trouble sleeping, and some couples in which one of the partners has PTSD will also say that their dreams are affected or they'll get flashbacks when they sleep, and so sometimes they can do things in their sleep that they normally wouldn't do, like choking or hitting, just because they're in that flashback and they don't really realize that they're in the flashback and what they're doing is what they're really doing in person. And so people may also avoid situations or triggers that remind you of the traumatic experience you've had. And some couples say that they have secondhand PTSD, is what they call it. And it's basically when their partner, the one that doesn't have PTSD, will avoid triggers and situations that may trigger their partner to get a flashback. So they're on edge, making sure that they don't get a flashback. So they as well are avoiding triggers. So, research shows that children who were abused are 6 times more likely to have PTSD. There's personality disorders that include trouble dealing with stress and problems. This includes behaviors and thoughts. And children who experienced abuse as a child are 12 times more likely to attempt suicide. This can be associated with other mental health problems and can be a result from not having access to services or just being abused for over a period of time. Obesity and eating disorders. As a result from child abuse, they are more likely to be obese and they are 5 times more likely to have an eating disorder. In a longitudinal study done, results showed that children are 20 to 40 times more likely to be obese as an adult. This includes being abused as well as witnessing domestic violence as a child. So it's not just the child receiving the abuse directly, but as well as witnessing their parents, violence between their parents or violence between parents and other siblings, just different types of violence. And so they're 5 times more likely to have an eating disorder such as bulimia, binge eating, anorexia, etc. Substance abuse. Substance abuse problems in women increase risk of drug abuse, and they are 5 times more likely to use drugs. In studies done in correlation with men, women, and abuse, research found that there was a relationship with drug use and childhood abuse. They found women were more likely to turn to drugs than men, although men in general have a higher chance of using drugs. They found that people who have a history of abuse are 5 times more likely to turn to drugs and 10 times more likely to use injected drugs. So I get to work with troubled teens and teens that are in juvie, and most of them are there because of drug abuse. And when you really get to talk to them and you get to know them and you get to hear their background, you'll see that their drug abuse is because they didn't come from good homes or they don't have good parents that support them and care for them. And a lot of them are abused and they don't know that they're abused. They don't know that it's not normal to get yelled at or to get hit. They don't know that it's not normal to not eat every day at normal times. It's just neglect and they don't see that. And a lot of them, their parents are drug users and they don't realize it's not normal to see their parents get high or to see their parents get drugs, and that's how they're introduced to drugs, is because of their parents. So you really see that relationship with substance abuse and childhood abuse and how everything kind of just comes together. So, alcohol abuse, they're 7 times more likely to become an alcoholic. Um, they use alcohol as a way to suppress their memories and feelings, and they will turn to alcohol because of depression or other problems they are dealing with. Alcohol is kind of just easier way to deal with emotions and feelings. It's cheaper too. Sometimes people can't find help or they don't have the money to find help, so they'll turn to alcohol. Sometimes they're ashamed and they feel guilty and they don't want to speak of their abuse, so they turn to alcohol. Violence and criminal behavior. They may be in a cycle of abuse. History of abuse is linked to crimes, and they may have anger management problems. They found that in some cases, because they are abused, they may be in the cycle of abuse, so they treat their kids the way they were treated. Now, not everybody handles it the same way, and not everybody is going to abuse somebody because they were abused. Um, so don't think that every case is this way. In a research setting, they found that children of abuse and neglect have a higher chance of committing a crime or being arrested. I interned at a jail last semester, and when you get to know them, you see the repeat offenders, the people that are in the cycle of getting arrested and going to jail and getting out and doing good and then doing something and going back, and you see their background and they talk to you about how they were brought up and how their family was, and you see their family dynamics and you see the signs of abuse and neglect, and they don't see it, but you know. So they also may tend to act out in violent behavior. They also tend to not do well under stress or when they get frustrated, so they will lash out because they have a hard time controlling their anger and the way they react. And especially in a jail setting, they're not happy being there. They're not happy having to share bathrooms and sinks and showers with 50 other people that are in their cells. And so you see them lash out, and you see the signs of when they're getting angry. They'll tend to get red, or they'll create a fist, and they get really frustrated when they don't get their way or when you tell them you can't help them. So there's a relationship between abuse and violence and criminal behavior. So in conclusion, we talked about long-term effects of child abuse. This includes physical, mental, some substance abuse, health abuse, and alcohol abuse, just effects that are a result of abuse. Um, just know that not everybody is going to act in the same way, and if they were abused as a child, it does not mean that they're going to turn to drugs or alcohol or become violent. So, um, everybody is different and they're strong and they handle things in their own way. And if you do suspect abuse, please call someone and know the signs. If they're a child or even if they're an adult, just ask. There's some people that just need that one person to ask so they'll feel comfortable and disclose. It's better to do something about it than to live the rest of your life knowing that you didn't at least call. Um, and just know that there are services to help you that are accessible to you. Here in Cruces, I know there's La Piñon and La Casa, and there's counseling services on campus. And just know your resources and know that there are people that do want to help and they do care about you. So, in conclusion, we have talked about the long-term effects of child abuse. We've seen physical, mental signs, health signs, substance abuse, alcohol. These are not all the long-term effects, but these are just some of them. Um, just know that not everybody is the same and they're not going to act the same. So if they were abused as a child, it does not mean that they're going to turn to alcohol or drugs, and it does not mean that they're going to become violent. So everybody is different and they're strong and they handle things in their own way. And if you do suspect that a child is being abused, or anybody in general, please call and just know the signs and get them help, and don't be afraid to go up to them and ask them, because sometimes they just need that one person to ask them if they're okay, just so that they're comfortable to talk about it and disclose to somebody. So just if you do suspect, it's better to call and know that you did something to help instead of just pushing it under and not doing anything. And if you were abused, just know that there are services to help you that are accessible to you. Here in Cruces, there's La Piñón, La Casa. There are counseling services on campus. Just know that you are not alone, and there are resources and people that do want to help you. So, that's it.